All right, you're days away from purchasing that dream home, and all of a sudden, title calls and says there's a lien on the property. What do you do? Stay tuned, and I'll let you know.
You better get fired up.
So it doesn't happen often. That's the good news. We don't have liens pop up that often that at least are unknown. They do pop up, but they're usually known. Mortgages pop up all the time. That's pretty typical. But we're looking for stuff that really doesn't pop up until the end. Sometimes, like a roofer did some work for you and they put a lien on, or maybe it's a child support lien, or there could be a lot of different liens that are put against a property. And all of a sudden, either the seller doesn't know about them or the seller did not disclose them. And in a title search, title's going to go through, they're going to look to see if there's any liens, and they find something. What are your rights as a buyer in that situation? What are your rights as a seller in that situation? And I'm going to add to it easements and encroachments as well. So easements are somebody has the right to use my property. It's still my property. It's not their property, but they have the right to use a particular part of my property for a particular reason. So the city, the county, the electric company, they may have water easements to run water lines, or sewer easements to run sewer lines, just utility easements, or electrical easements to run electrical lines. And that is still your property, but they've got the right to use your property, that particular part of your property, for that particular reason, right? An encroachment. Well, let's give one more example of an easement. Let's say that the road is up front here, and then I live right here, and you live behind me, but you're not on any road, so you're kind of landlocked. There's no road for you. There might be an easement coming along the edge of my property, a driveway easement, allowing you to access your property through a driveway. Now, I can't change that from a driveway into anything else, but I still own it. But you have the right, as the owner of this back property, to utilize my property, or at least that portion of it, in a very specific way, that specific way being a driveway. So that's an easement, okay? An encroachment is, I don't want to say always, but in every case that I've ever been in, it's always been an accident. My shed, my fence, my garage, hopefully not your house, but it could be your house, encroaches on the neighboring lot. Meaning I thought the line was here, so I built my garage right here, but really the line is here. So I'm 2, 3, 4, 5 feet over my line. That's an encroachment onto your property. That's a problem, right? Especially if you're the guy who has the encroachment on your property. Now you're trying to sell a property. I've only had this once. And you find out the neighbor's whatever, shed, fence, garage, is encroaching on your property. That's going to impact the value. So again, what is the seller? What is the buyer? Do you have the right to do? So let's talk about the right of the buyer first, whether it's a lien, an easement, an encroachment. If it was not disclosed up front, and now you find out, you have the right to a property free and clear of any easements, encroachments, or liens. Doesn't mean you can't move forward. If you want to move forward, you can move forward. With a lien, you're going to want to find out, is the seller in writing guaranteeing that they're going to pay that lien? If they're not, well, you probably don't want to take that property on. And, maybe it's a $500 lien. Okay, well, then the property's worth it. It sucks. I'm going to try to negotiate, but if I can't, sure, maybe I'm still going to move forward. But if it's a $35,000 roof lien, most people aren't going to want to move forward with that, right? Unless you get the property at a $50,000 discount, you're probably not going to want to move forward on something like that. In most cases, though, in fact, I would say every case I can think of, the seller paid it. So I've never had an issue where the seller didn't pay it. I did have an issue where at closing, I'm physically at closing, and a guy who was also a realtor in our office, but worked at a bank, a local bank, he showed up to closing and he demanded that my seller pay a loan that was owed to the bank that he worked at. And I did a little bit of digging, and I had like 30 minutes to do it in. And I found out that that lien was not attached. There was no lien attached to the house. right? So yes, he had that loan, but it was there was no collateral attached to that loan. So I talked to my client. My client said, "Do I have to pay this off?" I said, "Legally, you do not have to pay this off. It is not attached to the house. You're still allowed to close on the house." And he said, "Then that's what we're doing." My job is to follow through with the wishes of my clients. I said, "Okay, great, sign here," and we followed through with them. That's the only case where I've seen a I don't want to say a lien because there was no lien, but a loan, a known loan, not be paid off at the time of closing. So, wink, wink. If you're doing work for someone and it's significant work, or you're giving them a loan, or there's some sort of seller financing or whatever it is, you want to put a lien against that property, or there's no trail to ensure that when title closes on that property, they can make sure that you get paid back. So you want to attach that lien. Okay. So again, as a buyer, you can back out, but again, I've never seen a seller not take care of that. As a seller, you're disclosing the fact that there are no liens. And I can't imagine a case. I'm not saying it's not possible, but in what case would you have a lien against your property without signing something, which that's your disclosure? Even if you don't read it, that's your disclosure. How would you possibly have a lien against your property without knowing it? So either you knew about it and didn't disclose it. Well, that's an issue of fraud, or you didn't know about it. But then I would ask how you didn't know about it, because you have to sign all this paperwork, right? So either way, I think you're gonna have to sell the property and pay that off. Do I know that legally? I don't know that, but I can't imagine a case where that's not true. Um, okay, so let's give you another case. You are selling your home for 400 grand and you're only going to make 20 grand on it, but there's a lien for 40 grand on the property, meaning you're going to be out 20 grand. They're going to suck up your 20 grand equity, plus you need another 20 grand. Can they force you to sell? I would still say, I mean, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money, but could the buyer sue you for specific performance, forcing you to sell? They could. And you might even get the house, but I don't think you're going to get any damages or anything like that, because they're not going to have the money to do it, to pay for it. And if you follow through with it, they're still not going to have the money. And so it's not going to close unless you come up with the extra cash. And if you take them to court and you win, okay, great. They owe you X amount of dollars, but they don't have any money to pay you with. So is it really worth it? Is it really going to go anywhere? But again, I've sold a lot of houses. I've never seen that particular issue happen. Now let's get back to easements and encroachments. I have seen that happen a time or two. In a lot of cases, it's pretty minor. I mean, nobody cares about utility easements. Everybody's got a utility easement. That's not a big deal. But if your neighbor has an easement over your property, I have seen shared driveways. Maybe the driveway comes in and then it Y's out, right? One goes to their yard, one goes to your yard. But that section where it starts is half on your property, half on their property. I've seen that a lot. People may not like it. I don't know how you wouldn't disclose that, how you don't know that, but maybe you don't. But I've never seen an issue with it. Have I seen a fence over 2, 3, 4 inches? Yes. I've never had anybody have an issue with it. Does it suck? Sure. But is it that big of a deal? No. I have seen, my buyer is purchasing a home and we find out that the garage, the detached garage, was built after the home was built, and it was built over the property line onto the neighboring property. Now we had some negotiations occur from the seller and their attorney to get that portion of land purchased from the neighbor, who is very reasonable, in my opinion, and gave us the land and a new survey and everything else, so that there were no encroachments, were no easements. We could get free and clear title and everything else. But that didn't happen. That process didn't even start to occur until title pulled from the county and saw, oh my gosh, we've got this garage over the line. That's an encroachment. That's a problem. It's going to impact the insurance policy that we're giving both the lender and the buyer. And when that was disclosed, the buyer said, not excited about that. I do remember, though, the buyer really didn't even have to say anything, because the seller was, hey, this is our problem. We're going to fix it. Give us a couple days and we'll do it. And they did. So it really didn't turn into a problem at all. But do you have the right to back out if the seller won't back out? Yes. What if you are somehow financially in on that property, right? Let's say you've paid for an inspection and you've paid for a survey and whatever. And you're like, hey, you guys had to have known about this. Now we're going to sue you for any damages. I think you'd have to prove that they didn't know it, because that's the whole purpose of getting a survey and doing, a lien search through the county, through the city. But you'd have to prove that they knew it and did not disclose it, and that it negatively affects the value of the property. How you're going to prove that they knew that? Well, number one is going to be tough. Number two, it's going to be dependent upon every single situation. It's not something I can discuss in this video because every situation is different. But yeah, there are certainly ways to get that done. But again, it's so rare and it happens so infrequently. And here's another question I get. Okay, Joe, what if, because we're all humans, everybody makes mistakes. What if the county doesn't find some of this stuff? What if they don't find a lien? What if they don't find an encroachment, an easement, whatever, and then all of a sudden, poof, I'm owning it, and a year later it pops up, and the old seller, let's say they're dead, or they moved to Japan or whatever, they're gone. There's no way to go after them, right? That's what your title policy is for. I know a lot of people complain about the price of a title policy when they're dealing with title, but I'm telling you, you don't have an option. If you got funding, you have to get one for the lender. It is an option if you get one for yourself, but holy smokes, it makes, in my opinion, no sense not to get that. It's a one-time cost. It generally, on a $400,000 property, I want to say it's $2,400. I could be wrong. Maybe it's a little bit less than that, $1,800, $2,000, somewhere around there. But it's compared to a $400,000 asset. Are you going to pay that? Of course. I pay more than that on my house, and I pay that every single year. Why wouldn't I pay this one time and I can live there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and it still covers me? It really, I do see people who pay cash. I don't see funded people say they don't want it, but I see cash people say they don't want it. And I've seen one or two of them bit. Everybody else, like let's say 30 of them have done it in my career. 28 of them have been just fine. They saved that couple grand. Way to go. But the two that didn't, holy smokes, did it negatively impact the value of the property? And there was no recourse for them because they chose, and they signed a waiver saying, I choose not to get a title policy. So be really careful with that. I just cannot imagine doing that. And I'll take risks. I mean, I'll take calculated risks. I'm not risk adverse. I just think that particular risk versus the reward does not make sense. So anyway, guys, there you go. That's what happens when you've got a lien, an encroachment, or an easement that pops up on your property. What your rights are, what commonly happens. And if you're ever in that situation, I'll tell you, if options like that one I had where the seller was, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it was great. It was what we wanted and more. Awesome. But if that's not happening, get an attorney. An attorney might cost you $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever it is. Even minimally, get a consultation, and it'll help you immensely with what it is you're doing moving forward. And you don't necessarily want to just back out because you're scared. You might be backing out on a great deal, a great property. You now, because you see something on that property, might have a great negotiation opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could benefit you depending upon the situation, depending upon your situation, the seller, their situation, their motivation, the agents included, everything. So really just talk to a professional, talk to an attorney to find out what it is your options are. Guys, thanks for joining me. If you like this and you find this content valuable, please like and share. I would appreciate it. And thank you very much for joining me. Have a great rest of your week. Take care.